With Cataclysm's final raid tier soon approaching, it won't be long till thoughts start to turn to World of Warcraft's 4th expansion and our next destination in the modern classic game, Mr. Pandaria. Back during Mr. Pandaria's original release, it had a very mixed reception, with people feeling as though the new setting and the Pandaren race were a bit too whimsical for the World of Warcraft. But many of those who played through the expansion will tell you it ended up doing a lot of things right, and by the end of it, and certainly in retrospect, many now hold it in very high regard, and that it's an expansion which definitely defied expectations. So what caused this change in opinion? What went down well in MoP? And overall, what did this expansion change coming into this version of the game from Cataclysm? Well, that's what I'll be talking about today, 10 of the biggest changes that Mr. Pandaria made to World of Warcraft. It's going to be quite difficult to keep it down to just 10 things though, as this expansion really did make waves within the game. But whether you're new to Mr. Pandaria or somebody that played it back in the day, this should give you an idea about this expansion or maybe a refresher on some of its larger features. So with that said, let's begin. But first, a quick word from today's sponsor, HelloFresh. I'm sure you've heard of HelloFresh by now, and that's because it's America's #1 meal kit delivery service that gets fresh ingredients and varied recipes right to your door. HelloFresh offers over 30 calorie smart or protein smart recipes weekly, all with pre-proportioned ingredients delivered straight to you. And there's so many options beyond that, so there will be something for everyone. The convenience of HelloFresh is what really makes a difference though. You save time and money on shopping, you save time in the kitchen, and you'll get the exact amounts of what you need, so nothing ends up going to waste. It also helps you level up that cooking stat in real life. So whether it's for saving time or getting on track with better eating, HelloFresh is definitely worth a try if you've been considering. And if you check out my link below, you'll be able to save a bunch extra while you do so. Click the link below or scan the QR code and use my code WILLYFEB10 and receive 10 free meals and free breakfast for life. That'll be one breakfast item per box whilst your subscription is active and you're in the US. The link and code are still valid in all countries though, and a respective local discount will apply. As always, thank you to HelloFresh for the support on the channel, and let's get back onto WoW. Typically, the endgame in World of Warcraft so far has been pretty focused on PvP or PvE. Mr. Pandaria expands on that in so many different ways. One of the new bits of content that you'll be coming across during your leveling journey will be Half Hill, a farm located in the middle of the Valley of the Four Winds. Here you can take some time off from saving the world and instead engage in the real endgame of World of Warcraft. Farming. It feels almost like a part of player housing that was finally implemented into the game. Then again, we know Blizzard are doing player housing for real in retail's next expansion, so maybe some ideas from Half Hill get reintegrated into the game somehow. Anyways, Half Hill will have you learning how to manage your player-owned farm, building reputations with NPCs, and unlocking tons of different items, ranging from things for other professions, pets, cosmetics, and more. And as you progress, more new content will become available as well. It's just something small to work towards every day and a bit of optional content which exists in Mr. Pandaria. I mean, it's about as close as we got to a player-owned area in the game until Warlords of Draenor came along and we had the Garrisons incident. But let's not get into that now. Either way, Half Hill is a nice chill addition to the game and something a bit different to get invested in. Speaking of brand new endgame content, there's also the addition of pet battles. Nearly all the various companion pets that you have will turn into battle pets that can be used to engage in battle with various trainers across Azeroth as well as other players. It's a pretty similar system to Pokemon, which you'll know about, with your pets having various abilities to learn as they level, as well as strengths and weaknesses to take into account when battling. Worth a mention is that pretty much everything in Mr. Pandaria, from discovering rare items, gathering professions, battlegrounds, pet battles and so on, will grant experience. And if you enjoy this kind of content and plan to go for the achievements related to them, they're actually pretty solid experience at the same time. Some of the higher level pet battles can be quite tricky too and need specific team setups. During Mr. Pandaria originally, I did get quite into pet battles, I will say, and used it as my main way to farm gold, where I leveled via doing all the legendary trainer battles across Pandaria and then sell the pets I was leveling once they hit 25. And it was pretty good. I mean, I thought it was good and I enjoyed doing it, so it was good enough for me. Later on in Mr. Pandaria 2, there is the Celestial annual tournament, which adds a bunch more content, as well as a very challenging series of pet battles where you can't heal your pets in between each fight, so you really need to plan ahead of time. Either way, pet battles were something I enjoyed back in the day, both for the content and the gold making opportunities. Next up are bonus rolls. So if you ever had a boss that drops that one bis item for you, or it's supposed to drop it, but each week when you kill it, it drops nothing. Well, with bonus rolls you can ensure that you get an extra chance once per week to get that all important drop. But you do need to do a bit of work to get these bonus rolls from a quest, which need a certain number of lesser charms of good fortune. These lesser charms are obtained from doing basically any missive Pandaria endgame content, or at least they were as of the last patch. We'll see how Blizzard handles this, and a bunch of them could be turned in exchange for elder charms of good fortune, and these elder charms were what you needed for bonus rolls. You could earn 3 elder charms per week and hold up to 20, or again, that's at least how it worked on the final patch. But just know that bonus rolls exist. So if you're tanking on Cataclysm right now, you know you have something called Vengeance, which in short makes it so when you take damage, you do more damage. But in Cata, Vengeance is pretty tame and it doesn't convert that much damage taken back into attack power. It was Mr. Pandaria with this passive ability, which is available for all tank specs, really became crazy powerful. Now launch Vengeance in MOP was just on another level of overpowered. It made it so 1.8% of unmitigated damage was granted as attack power for 20 seconds, and this effect didn't have a cap. So as a tank you literally wanted to take as much damage as you possibly could without dying and get a massive Vengeance stack, and then you could do insane damage. In patch 5.4, that'll be Siege of Orgrimmar, Vengeance got hit with nerfs, reducing its scaling by 0.3% of damage taken, and trying to remove cheesing Vengeance stacks from doing things which are a bit silly, such as standing in fire or tanking extra mobs for no reason other than to gain more Vengeance stacks. I expect us to get the post-nerf version of Vengeance in Mr. Pandaria Classic unfortunately, but nevertheless back in the day tanks absolutely still did a lot of damage on certain fights. I've dug out the top passes here from Heroic Siege of Orgrimmar, and all these took place before the Warlords of Draenor pre-patch on October 14th, so these passes should be taking into account proper Mr. Pandaria balance, gearing, and of course the post-nerf Vengeance. I imagine there was still some creative use of game mechanics involved, as is standard with top passing, but to me it says that tanks can absolutely still do very well in Mr. Pandaria. This is the expansion where tanks are both a super important role in your raid and can top DPS at the same time. I don't think there's another version of World of Warcraft which has offered this experience, so it's worth a special mention for Mr. Pandaria. Mr. Pandaria was also the first expansion where everyone got legendaries, and since vanilla, legendaries have been approached in a number of different ways, from random drops to epic quest lines and plenty of gathering of items in between. Mist stopped with the idea that a certain class is chosen for an orange item in any given expansion, and instead gave all players the chance to work towards legendary rewards. Mr. Pandaria's legendary story follows along from the happenings in Cataclysm, with the elusive dragon Rathian being center stage. First up you work towards a legendary gem which can be socketed into Shar-touched items from various bosses in Mr. Pandaria. This gem is quite plain though and is just a bunch of your main stats. Later there's also a legendary gem too which you can earn during the Throne of Thunder. These have some very powerful effects such as giving a haste buff, reducing physical damage taken and so on. But the one you'll remember the most if you ever played MOP or you may have even heard of will be the legendary capes earned in the final patch. Not only do they have a ton of stats, they have a cool visual effect when they proc, but they're kind of a big deal performance wise for every single class and spec in the game. I remember these legendaries being quite Alton friendly unfortunately back in the day due to all the quest steps that you had to go through, but if Wrath and Kata are anything to go by so far, Blizzard have shown that they want to make legendaries easier and faster to get, so we'll see what they do. But Mr. Pandaria was the first expansion where everyone got a legendary, and the cape is especially worth looking forwards to. Another new addition from Mr. Pandaria were challenge mode dungeons. So Blizzard have been in a bit of a pickle with dungeon content in World of Warcraft for a while. You see, dungeons are cool, and of course you can't have an expansion without dungeons, that would be crazy, but the problem was they were only relevant for such a short space of time at endgame. After 2 weeks or so of an expansion coming out, all this cool dungeon content they'd spent so long working on was just now leveling content. How do they get more people back into World of Warcraft's 5-player dungeons? The answer, or at least the answer back then, was challenge modes. And challenge modes were quite different from modern day Mythic Plus. They would normalize your gear so it wasn't all about overgearing the content, but completing them as fast as possible using what you had. Leaderboards were viewable, and the top team would even have a temporary title to show off. Rewards included mounts, toys, pets, and of course those famous transmog sets, which Blizzard still have never brought back into retail World of Warcraft. They didn't even bring them back for MOP Remix. So Mr. Pandaria Classic may be your second and only other chance to get your hands on these if you really want them. But challenge modes were just a bit of extra fun you could push towards as a group during the end game. Speaking of something else to do, next addition we have to the game will be the Timeless Isle. I think after adding this zone, Blizzard realized that they were really onto something here, and a zone at endgame where you go and do collection stuff has become a staple in World of Warcraft ever since, with zones in the future such as Tanaan Jungle, Soromar, Nazjatar, and many more. The Isle of Thunder was definitely its predecessor both in content and spirit, but the Timeless Isle for me has always been the OG go here and do stuff zone when you don't really have anything else to do. I always like getting done with a raid or just having some spare time and heading over to the isle and chipping away at a bit more of the content there, whether it was on the achievements, pets, mounts, rep, and so on. Timeless Isle will come towards the end of Mr. Pandaria, but it's definitely something that I'm looking forwards to seeing fresh again. Onwards to the top 3, and we have some pretty big additions left. At number 3 is the Brawlers Guild, which is definitely something I can't wait to try again. During the first major content patch of Mr. Pandaria over in the Valley of Honor in Orgrimmar, as well as below the Deep Run Tran from the Stormwind entrance, the Brawlers Guild opened. The Brawlers Guild would allow you to take on different PvE battles in an arena where your fellow players could watch as you completed these challenges. It had a queue system so that one person could only be in the arena at once, and there was also a hard enrage timer so one person couldn't just occupy it for ages. The Brawlers Guild was just amazing content. The fights range from kind of memey difficulty onto things which were properly hard to do even if you were super geared. It was fun to see people do the hard challenges as well as to see them fail on the complete meme fights. And above all, it just felt like you were part of something and that it was a good place to spend some time in WoW when you weren't sure what else to do. In Mr. Pandaria originally, it could be a bit difficult to get an invitation as you needed to buy them from the black market auction house, which is another feature MOP introduced, or get an invite from another player who had reached at least rank 7 in the Brawlers Guild. I doubt they're gonna change this unfortunately, but who knows. Either way, the Brawlers Guild was a great feature of Mr. Pandaria, and I'm looking to see how it shapes up by modern standards. At number 2 is a brand new talent system. So they revamped stuff in Kata, and in Mr. Pandaria, guess what? They're gonna change your talent system again. Now instead of roughly 1 talent point every 2 levels, instead now you get 1 point per 15 levels. It doesn't feel great when you're leveling a character, to be honest, because you just don't get as much fun stuff to try out as you go. But once you're level 90, it's a system which isn't as bad as it sounds. Another change alongside this is that in Mr. Pandaria, Blizzard basically give your spec loads of stuff that would have been in your talent trees as default just by picking that spec. These new talent rows every 15 levels will let you pick 1 out of 3 talents, and the rows are generally dedicated to different themes. You might have 1 row for survivability, 1 for crowd control, 1 for throughput, and so on. And your talents will often be modified based upon which spec you are within your class, so that they do something different and make sense for each spec. All in all, there is less choice to make here, but to be honest, the Cataclysm talent system didn't have much choice either, because you had to invest 31 points in a tree before you could go into the other trees. But Mr. Pandaria classes were fun, and Blizzard limiting how much choice you had let them put a lot of power into your baseline class abilities because they knew what you had to pick. And in the end, I think the gameplay was good enough to compensate for the lack of choices that could be made. You'll have to see how you feel about it for yourself, but you'll find a lot of people will tell you that classes were fun in Mr. Pandaria, and that happened for a reason. And last but not least, there has to be a mention to the brand new race and class combo, which I am bundling together here. The Pandaren themselves are an interesting addition to WoW as the first neutral race, where you could choose your path to Horde or Alliance after having completed the starting zone. And alongside them came World of Warcraft's second new class, the Monk. This new class has the same 3 specs it always has in Mistweaver as a healer, Brewmaster as a tank, and Windwalker as a melee DPS. As either physical damage dealing spec, they play kind of like rogues do, with Chi being their combo points and an energy system as a resource, whereas Mistweaver will have your standard healer mana bar and will have a mix of powerful heal over time effects and direct heals. Monks in WoW were known for their crazy high mobility, combo-based attacks, and fast-paced gameplay. At one point they weren't even going to have an auto attack, and you just have to spam an ability for that. This changed pre-release of Mists of Pandaria though, so you don't have to worry about that. Also, Monk can be any race apart from Goblin or Worgen in Mists of Pandaria, though they did update the game in Dragonflight where those two can be monks as well, so we'll see if they put this in the game. I'll be doing more of an in-depth video on the Monk of course pre-Mists of Pandaria's release, so you can have a better idea of how this class will look to join that version of World of Warcraft. So if you played back then or are curious to see how this class started out in its opening expansion, you'll be able to find out pretty soon. And that is it, 10 of the largest features I could think to mention which changed between Cataclysm and Mists of Pandaria. Again, it was quite difficult to limit it just to 10, the scope of what Mists of Pandaria covers when you look at everything is pretty massive. So let me know what you're looking forwards to in Mists of Pandaria and what other MOP related content you'd like to see in the channel down in the comments below. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I shall see you on the next one very soon.